My 14-year-old, the other day, we're talking about life insurance and whole life, and I love whole life. And I pull up a policy for her, and she looks at the policy. I got them all 6 kids. She sees the death benefit. I said, here's your death benefit. And she's like, I'm worth $1 million. I said, only if you're dead. I don't want you to be dead, but I got this for you. There's cash value in there. You're saving money every year. So she's understanding now the savings component. She's understanding life insurance. She's understanding the value of death. She already had a job, so money was going into her account for paychecks and for that. So don't try to push things on them. Let the conversation take over naturally. Some kids will gravitate towards the subject. Some kids don't. Find the genius in each child and let each child, attract to their genius.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the Biz Dad podcast. I am super excited to have my guest today. He has been an inspiration for everything from my real estate journey to talking to him about fatherhood to being in his amazing mastermind. It's been a lot of fun to be around Gino Barbaro and seeing his family at work, and I just cannot wait to get to know him a little bit more on a personal level as opposed to the real estate and business side. I've definitely talked to him a lot about that, and now it's time to go a little bit deeper on the dad side as well. But I can't wait to see how the conversation goes, and look forward to learning as much as I can. So Gino, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, your family, and tell us a bit about your businesses, really.
Adam, thanks for having me on. Real quick, I am part of the Jake and Gino community. Jake and I started the education community a few years ago. I am a father of 6 children, ages 23 to 8. My oldest daughter is a missionary right now. My son, at 20 years old, he's at the camp with her right now just for the summer. 17-year-old, 14-year-old, 12-year-old, and a 9-year-old. Been married quarter of a century this year, 25 years. It's been a long time. It's been great. No, it's been I'm really fortunate that I married my wife. I mean, two things that I'm really blessed with is being married to her and actually finding Jake as a partner. Those are 2 things that really worked out well in life. And it's ironic that, we're always striving and achieving for money, but I think the relationships in life are so important. Obviously the relationships with your children, but the other kinds of relationships are so important. We've been doing deals, Jake and myself, for about 12 years now. I met Jake at the restaurant. I used to own a restaurant for years and years up in New York. And I met Jake. We moved down. He moved down to Knoxville, started doing deals together in Knoxville. I left the restaurant in 2016 and moved to Florida in 2017. And that's the short end of it. I was pretty lucky. I think most of us think we have a great childhood. And then when we look back, there's some holes in the childhood, and we all do. My father, immigrant from Italy, he unfortunately lost his mother when he was 13 years old. And that was a big hole in his life. And I remember seeing the pictures. I mean, this is, 7 years ago when it happened. So you're seeing black and whites, and I see the picture of him. And that is a big hole in a young man's life. I mean, he's got his sister who's 8 years old. My grandfather, his father at the time, had to go to the farm to work. There's no, grieving time. There's no grieving. And my father had to take care of his sister. And fortunately, my grandfather remarried, and to my grandmother, who's was an amazing woman. She felt sorry for my dad and his sister. That's why she married my grandfather. They don't make them like that anymore. And was a truly amazing woman. And I think that's really helped my father all along, those young years, and trying to look back at his relationship. And then he got married a little later on in life. He got married at 30 years old. So, that generation didn't get married that late, but he got married late and had me and my brother, and he had a restaurant. And I grew up in the restaurant business working with him. And I thought all kids went to work with their dads at a restaurant. That's how I grew up. My father instilled a couple things in me, hard work ethic, I think integrity. Do what you say and say what you do. The restaurant business is not an easy business. It's a really labor intensive, sort of labor of love kind of business. And I worked with him throughout my whole adulthood, and he ended up passing away when I was 37 years old back in 2007, right before the Great Recession. And when the Great Recession hit, I was actually wondering, am I living his dream or am I living my dream? Because I loved working with him. I loved going to the restaurant. I loved cleaning the legs of veal and doing the chicken and the sirloin steak. And I loved all that. That was so much fun working with him, because I always felt as if I had somebody that I could turn to. And that was a great thing about having that family, having that support system. Now, on the bad side, he could be very stubborn. It was usually his way or the highway. I mean, we were gardeners. I'm like, Dad, I'm going to put some raised beds in. No, you're not doing that. Really? I didn't put raised beds in until after he passed away. Because sometimes they're hard-headed. I'd want to cook certain dishes certain ways. Sometimes we get into arguments about that. But I think overall, I mean, I had a really good relationship with him. The only thing that when he passed away, it's about that saying to me, you've got to take care of your brother, or you've got to, and that left sort of a scar on me, because it took me a couple of years to actually say to myself, it's okay to leave the restaurant, because my brother was my partner in the restaurant, and that held a heavy weight on. But as I look back, I can see why he did that. It's because that he felt the need to take care of his sister when his mom passed away. So I've been processing those emotions over the last few years, and now I can understand. I can still be angry about him doing that, but I can understand and I can accept the fact that, hey, that's why he felt that way, is because he had that burden thrown upon him, and he just wanted me to, make sure that I look out for my brother.
Yeah, I've had similar things in a different perspective, but it's amazing how much we can look back on our history, especially with our, as current dads, looking back on our dad, going, man, I can actually see where they're coming from now. I didn't see it then. I didn't understand then why he was doing what he was doing, or why he said what he said, but I totally understand now. And, maybe it's like I'll do what I can to not put that pressure on my kids, or maybe, now I understand, I can change that direction and actually apply that same principle in a different way with my kids. But, having that self-reflection and realizing, okay, well, I think that's great for any part of life, right? If anybody you're related, like in relations with, whether it's a friend, family, anybody, if you can look at things from their perspective, it can absolutely change the dynamic in the relationship.
I would actually challenge everyone, Adam, who's listening, to go back to your childhood. We did a couples coaching about 6 months ago. 9 Jake and Gino couples went out to Ireland to be with Phil McKernan. It's called Brave Couple. And I'd never done anything like this before with my wife. Couples coaching, it sounded a little, awkward. We've been so focused on the family and the kids all these years that we spent 4 days out there. And what it was is really a journey throughout your life. You go back into your past, into your childhood, and you see how you were raised, how you grew up, your beliefs that you've carried with you. Were you bullied? Did you have a great childhood? How was your relationship with your parents? How was your relationship with money? Whatever it looks like, you go into the present, see how you are today, and then you try to paint a picture of the future. So if you're struggling in certain parts of your life, like I didn't think I had anger. I'm not an angry person. Well, I think everybody listening to this, if they don't think that they're carrying some anger, then they're either delusional or they're just pushing it down so far that it's not there. And then what happens, one day it'll just blow up. I didn't think I had anger around that situation with my brother and having to be there and feeling as if I'm trapped there and always providing for him. And there's anger there. There's nothing wrong with it. You'll never be able to get rid of your anger. That's not, I think, the goal, to get rid of the anger. It's to process the emotion, let the emotion sit. Most of us are just afraid to do that. We're afraid to be by ourselves. Let it sit, let it marinate. And then you'll understand when you go off the handle or you make an irrational decision, well, why did you do that? Be aware of that. And if you're aware of your past, like, why am I so bad with money? Well, it's because maybe when you're 7 years old, you kept saying you're hearing your parents talking about money is evil and money is bad. And that's carried over into your future. So if you're aware of that, then all of a sudden you can be empowered, because you can start making decisions based on your conscious thoughts and not just doing things subconsciously. And it's hard work. Therapy may be involved. I think it's really good to look back and see what's going on. Don't get caught in the past and be stuck there for the next 5 years, but go back there, figure out what really influenced your life back then, and a lot of good things may have come out of it, but whatever you're stuck upon, try to work on that, bring it into the present. And once you can understand that and you're aware of that, you can actually start taking actions, and don't rush to take actions. I actually had to sit with that emotions for a couple of weeks before I actually made amends or started to try to make amends, because when we're in that negative emotional state, we make some pretty bad decisions. When we can sit down and think positively, think clearly, and all of a sudden things start to look better, that's when you start making those decisions. But don't be in a rush.
Yeah, absolutely. It took me a long time, relatively speaking, right, to kind of come to some of those realizations, like going through a lot of stuff in the military and doing some of the things that I've done, running around the mountains of Afghanistan. And I held on to a lot of stuff that I wasn't thinking I was holding on to.
Yes.
And it was no, I've already dealt with it. It's gone. That's why I'm not worried about it right now, and it's like, until I really sat down and dealt with it, it was like, man, I didn't realize that I was holding on to this stuff, and the more you do that, just to your point, it's affecting more of your life than you think. It's affecting more of your relationships than you think.
It's affecting your spouse because for some reason you may not even understand why you get triggered, why you have that, you have the stimulus and you respond a certain way. But if you can understand it, well, that's what happened to me. I'll give you a quick story. When I was 5 years old, I'm with my grandmother and we go to the grocery store. At that time, there's no credit cards. I wanted to buy these toy soldiers. And I remember, Grandma, can you buy them for me? She didn't have any money. She goes, she, in Italian, she said, tesoro, when we come back, I'll get them for you. And I still remember to this day that we didn't buy the toy soldiers. And I had that fear that if I didn't buy this thing now, or I didn't do this thing now, that it would escape me. So every time someone sends me an email or I have to do something, I'm very diligent. I get it done. But that can be overkill sometimes. It's okay if an email doesn't get unread for a day or so. It's all right. Now that I understand where that emotion comes from, I can process that emotion and go, okay, I still choose to do that email, but I don't have to have that fear or that anger around that emotion. I think that's so important to go back and say, why am I like that? Why am I irritable when I hear this or do this? It's so important because then you can make the decision to be or not to be. That's the important part. I can decide to sit on that email. I can understand why I'm going through these emotions. Most of us don't even know what those emotions are. Emotions are just sensations. It's just sensations in your body. We can't even put a word to them because we don't even know them. We don't even let them sit. And I am game to that. I've been doing that for a long time. I've just been realizing this the last several years. I wish I knew this a lot sooner. It would have helped me out a lot sooner. But it's one of those things where once you start figuring it out and you start processing it, you just want to know why you're doing it. And is it empowering you or is it disempowering you? And if it's empowering you, great, continue to do it. And if it's not, then choose not to do it.
Yeah. And I would say that it also make sure that it's not empowering you at the detriment of your family or anything too, right? Yes, because that can easily happen, right?
Absolutely.
But that's also the opposite of empowering. It feels empowering, but it's really not. You're really sabotaging yourself.
Yes.
But, and I look at a lot of that and I go, okay, well, what could I have affected better in my family's life had I realized this beforehand, right? Had I realized before I started doing X, Y, and Z with my kids? Have you looked back at it to go, okay, well, because I didn't think about these things, I feel as though I affected my children in this way, and this is how I would like to recover from that, or maybe recover is the wrong word, but in that self-actualization and understanding of what you're actually doing, like did you look back and say, hey, I think that's why I did X, Y, and Z with Gabriella and Sophia or whatever. Or maybe it was with Michael because he was your oldest son. Like, did you look back and think any of those things?
A couple of things pop to my mind is our relationship with money. I always had that scarcity mindset. And I always said, well, we can't do this or we can't do that or we have to save money at the detriment of maybe having an experience with them. Yeah. The other thing was with my wife was, the first time we went on vacation by ourselves was to a Jake and Gino boot camp. So it's like 18 years of marriage, we never went away by ourselves because I was in the restaurant business. I would close one week out of the year. We'd all go away on vacation. So the kids were always with us, which is great. But I never had the idea once again, raised with that concept of money. I can't waste money going away with my wife for the weekend. My kids are home. I should be going away with them. So that's what's important. So I look back at that, and that's one of those things where I wish we had done it sooner. Now,
I told you a cameo was going to happen. I told you before we recorded a cameo was going to happen.
Live and love.
What is that? Not right now. I'll get that later. You want to say hi to Mr. Gino?
Hi.
How we doing?
You doing all right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You just got out of the pool?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is Rourke sleeping?
He's getting dressed right now and then gonna lay down in bed.
There you go. All right, bud. I'll chat with you after. Love you, dude. You were gonna play a game? All right, hit send and I'll see if I can get to it. Yep. Little bum. Have a terrible day. I mean, I love you. That's what I used to tell the boys all the time when I drop them off at school. So, have a terrible day. And their teachers were like, what? And then they realize it's just a thing that I tell them. And I wonder, though, like to go back to this concept, here comes the other one because he can't be outdone.
That's right.
Came in. So, yeah, come here, buddy. Come say hi.
Another pool?
You're not here to say hi?
Say something to you.
Oh. You want to say hi to Mr. Gino? No?
Maybe.
Maybe? Joe,
He's not there.
you smell like you just got out of the pool. No, all right.
What are you doing next?
What are you going to do next?
We're able to.
No, you don't want that in? If we're able to what? You want to go jump on trampolines at Sky Zone? Let me see what happens after this call. You want to say goodbye to Mr. Gino? Bye.
Boo-boo.
I love you, silly boy. I told you they're going to make a cameo. That's just what they do. They like to do it when I'm recording podcasts.
That's great.
The joys of working from home. I love it. After the years of working all over the world, it's nice to be sitting in one spot and be able to hang out. But you were talking about vacation with your wife.
Oh, and that was one of those things where we just never did it. And I think it's a mistake. I think the relationship between the spouses is important. It's paramount. I mean, first God, then spouses, and then children. And don't use your children as an excuse not to do something. I can't leave New York because I'd be taking them from their friends. In fact, in reality is I need to leave New York because I need to cut the boundaries and I need to start over with my wife. We'll be happy. The relationship will be okay. And then the kids will benefit from that long term. I think we're afraid of short-term pain for long-term gain. I mean, the short-term pain is real, but that does lead to long-term gain. I think we have to focus on that as well.
Yeah, and those are the exact order that I always tell people that my God, my wife, my kids. Like, if it's not for my God, then I wouldn't have my wife. If it wasn't for my wife, I wouldn't have my kids. So somebody challenged me and said, well, you should probably put yourself in between God and your wife, because if you're not taking care of yourself, goes the whole adage of, put your mask on first. Like, if you're not taking care of yourself, and I don't know. I've been struggling with that. I don't remember. I think it was a few podcasts ago I was talking with somebody and they mentioned that, and I've been struggling with it ever since. I'd love to hear your
So you'd
thoughts
have to go back to his or her psychology. Maybe they didn't have the self-love when they were younger and they're worrying about themselves. Listen, love thy neighbor as thyself. That precludes that you love yourself. I think that's important. The happy wife, happy life is probably the stupidest thing I've ever heard. I mean, I used to believe that 20 years ago, but you can't make your spouse happy. You have to make yourself happy. And then for making yourself happy, it's not your job to make him or her happy. But if you're happy in your life and you're content, that will rub off and that'll bleed into the relationship. That'll make it happy. So I think you have to preclude that. You really have to take care of yourself, enjoy yourself, and love yourself. But I never felt a lack of love in my life, so I never felt disdain for myself either. So I never even thought of that, putting myself above my wife. I'm just put that relationship right up below God and the kids below it. But if that's the way that person feels, more power to them. They have to take care of themselves. Once they take care of themselves, they can come fully present. They can come fully engaged. Then they can go out and they can find somebody to love. I think that works for them.
Yeah, that's valid. Yeah, maybe that's why I've been struggling on my thought process on it, because I don't feel like I'm missing something in that area.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that if I guess, I mean, maybe that person is, and I at this point I don't even remember who it was, to be honest. But I'd be curious to reach back out and ask a similar question. Maybe podcast round 2 for that person, and bring them back on. But so when you was it 2016? You said you left the restaurant. So that was 7 years ago. So 7 years ago, you already had probably a few hundred doors by that point, if I were to guess. But you hadn't started the education company yet, right?
I just started it maybe 5 or 6 months. So I had a soft landing, as we call it. In October of 2015, I decided to tell my brother, listen, I'm not going to abandon you. I'm going to work for the next 6 months or so, hopefully a year, and work Monday through Friday in my real estate business. And on the weekends, I'll work at the restaurant. And I did that for 6 months. And after 6 months, it's like, I can't be doing both of them. I needed to have enough income coming in. Plus, I just didn't want to abandon him. So for me, that was the runway. You don't need to quit your W-2 job. You don't need to leave and go into this full time if you're not making some money. You need to be making some money and earning some income. And don't tell me that you don't have the time to do that, because you're working 9 to 5. I was working more because I had a restaurant. So you could figure out the hours in between. You have a 40-hour work week. You got another 20 hours plus a week to be able to put into it. If you do that for 6 months to a year, you'll have that runway. You'll have that one deal or two deals to be able to say, okay, I can finally ultimately leave my job. And for me, it was more challenging because I had the 6 kids. I'm living in New York. It's more expensive. Yeah. Jake had left, I think, a year and a half after our first deal because he was living in Tennessee. He had one child at the time, so his balance sheet looked a lot different than mine. Plus, he was managing the assets, so he was generating income from the property management side. So for us, for me, it took that extra 6 months to do it. And then when I left, it was an interesting time. I lived in New York for another 6 months, went down to Florida, spent a couple months in Florida to see if I actually did like to live here. Freaking loved it. And then I'm like, okay, next year we come back for a month, live down here at an Airbnb for a month, see if we like it. We did that. And then, 3 months later, thankfully, we sold a house in New York and moved down here.
That's awesome. That's, I'm happy to, I don't know if you knew this, but I moved to Florida recently. I spent almost a year now. But I love it down here. I'm thrilled to be down here in Florida for sure. No complaints. So you were working in the restaurant with your dad, and then your dad passes. You have 6 kids, probably what was 2013? You said, or 2007? Your dad passed. So, well, you only had a couple kids at that point. What, if any, thoughts did you have about Michael was already born by that point? So any thoughts on him coming into the restaurant? What were your thoughts on it? Like included, like it was a family business at this point.
It's interesting. That's a great question, Adam. I thought at the time that I wanted to delegate to them what they were supposed to do. And if you had told me 10 years ago that my oldest daughter is going to be a missionary and my second son is discerning for the priesthood, I'd be like, that's just not happening. It's not happening in my world. They're going to be entrepreneurs. They're going to become multimillionaires. And as you get older, the only thing you realize when you're parenting, what you really need to do is you need to create adults who are loving, adults who can make up their own decisions, young adults who can make those decisions, and they're ultimately going to leave. And you're not there as an entrepreneur to fix their problems. You're there to be by their side and walk with them. And when they do have a problem, they can come to you and say, hey, Dad, here's the problem. And you're not able to fix anything. That's not our job, is to fix. Your job is just to be there to lend guidance, to lend support. That's how I've transitioned my thought processes over the last 6 or 7 years. And, the oldest daughter, she actually went to college. When she was a freshman, she was in theater and music and in the whole Hollywood thing. And after 6 months, she's like, Dad, I want to tell you something. I don't like this at all. She goes, I want to go into youth ministry and philosophy. Best thing I ever heard in my entire life, because I didn't want to do theater. But you'll start learning as you have children, when you're telling them your own thoughts and what they're supposed to do, even though you're right, they're going to go against what you say for the most part. They need to go through those experiences and those challenges. My son, at the time when he started college his freshman year, it was challenging. I mean, like going from a homeschooling environment to a classroom environment where, the teachers aren't the greatest. They throw homework at you. They don't explain anything to you. He was struggling in the beginning with Excel and all that. And I remember just seeing the tears and the sadness. And that's the hardest thing as a parent, to sit back and to say, you know what? He has to go through those challenges. What is it? Iron sharpens iron, or whatever the saying, pressure makes diamonds. And if we don't allow our kids to suffer a little bit and to grow, and we're always there to help them with that soft landing, that's not going to build resilience in our children. That was a really hard lesson for me, to sit there and watch them cry about homework, because it brought back memories for myself. When I was in school, I was challenged. I'm like, I don't really know what the heck I'm doing here either. And my parents couldn't help me. They're both Italian. They're not school types. So I struggled as well. So I wanted to take that struggle away from him. I think the only thing you can do as a parent is to be there to support them and to lend an ear and to help them in any way possible, but not actually solve the problem for them. Let them solve their own problems.
And I think that's, I think that would be
much easier said than done.
What's that?
Much easier said than done.
But I think it's wise advice across the board, right? Whether it's our kids, our employees, our like the government to us, whatever. Like if I feel like we've created that issue a lot across society of wanting and needing to solve everybody's problems, when you're creating people who are just dependent on things, right? They're like, our kids are supposed to be our dependents until they're out of the house, and they're only dependent on us, hopefully, for food, shelter, that type of, like. But we need to create so the way I've liked to rephrase it or reframe it for me is my kids are like my little businesses, right? And when I'm talking to entrepreneurs, right, my job is to be the CEO of this company, make sure that the company rises to where it needs to be to become independent, and then I can just become a board of advisors. Once, like, I want to be able to step out as CEO at some point. Like, if all I'm doing is fixing their problems all the time and helping them, coddling and doing all those things, I'm never going to get to be released. I've seen it in many different families, both in within my family as well as in other families. Like you have 40-year-old boys walking around, like, because they don't know how to make decisions for themselves. They don't know, like, somebody's got to make the decision for them all the time, and it baffles my mind. So I love hearing you say that, because you do have to, as much as it hurts, watch the child go through the trial, be there for them, support them, but don't coddle them. Like, don't, like, let them work through it. Let them figure it out. I mean, your job is to keep them safe from harm, not safe from pain. Like, there is going to be a difference.
Big difference. So, yes.
Because they're going to go through heartache, they're going to go through problems, they're going to have issues, and it's just part. Like, for me, my dad worked a lot. He was gone 2-3 jobs at a time. There were times where we lived in way upstate New York, and he was down in the city working at Sing Sing prison, and like, I never saw him. Like, I would very rarely see him. So I got raised a lot by my mom. Well, that's a very different upbringing than being raised by my dad. So now I look at it and go, oh, wow, what was I missing out on? What kind of things are there? And it explained a lot of, like, I was pretty soft as a kid, and I would imagine that had a lot to do with it. So I wouldn't say I was a bubble boy, but I mean, I was very safe, and there wasn't, besides climbing trees and doing all that type of stuff, I was actually out adventuring and doing things that kids don't do these days. But man, I do wish that we were in a spot where I was right there, as having my dad there and doing all the stuff. And it wasn't until I was quite a bit older, shortly before joining the military. But no, I think you're spot on saying that it's not the job to make sure that they're completely protected at all times and let them go through the things. So I do struggle a little bit personally with, like, because I've done multiple different jobs to the military for a long time, and what I usually say is I don't want my kids to feel like they have to join the military. Like I did. I felt like it was that there was no other option. I didn't feel like I had to join it, just there was no other option. That's what my parents did. That's what I'm going to do, so I'm trying to include things, like I was telling you, we're going to start homeschooling this year. I want to include some entrepreneur stuff in there to teach them business and math and all the stuff that's going to go involved in that. But I also don't want to make it that I'm pressuring them into doing something. How did you kind of balance that to make sure that you weren't pressuring them one way or another, or and maybe balance is the wrong word, but how did you try to prevent yourself from forcing a hand one way or another?
That's a tough question. And early on you do, especially when we were homeschooling 20 years ago plus, it wasn't the cool thing. It was the anti-cool thing. Like, homeschool kids were weird. Now, ironically, everyone wants to be a homeschool kid. But when we started out, it was difficult. Were we doing enough work? Were we doing the right work? We didn't have the resources that you guys have now. I mean, there's so many different online academies. There's so many cooperatives, so many different groups around. Back then, we had our homeschool group up in New York, and it worked really well. And for me, I was always afraid about the money situation. I always wanted them to learn about money. And just having those conversations, those open conversations, letting them in. I think budgeting and sharing a home budget with children, no matter what age, and showing them the value of money. Go into a grocery store with $50, and that's all you have, or 100, whatever it is, and buy the groceries for $100, and you see how far it goes. Let them understand what the value of money is. They're too young to understand savings and investing at that age. When they get to be in their teens, then they'll start to be naturally curious and inquisitive. My 14-year-old, the other day, we're talking about life insurance and whole life, and I love whole life, and I pull up a policy for her, and she looks at the policy. I got them all 6 kids. She sees the death benefit. I said, here's your death benefit. And she's like, I'm worth $1 million. I said, only if you're dead. I don't want you to be dead, but I got this for you. There's cash value in there. You're saving money every year. So she's understanding now the savings component. She's understanding life insurance. She's understanding the value of death. She already had a job, so money was going into her account for paychecks and for that. So don't try to push things on them. Let the conversation take over naturally. Some kids will gravitate towards the subject. Some kids don't. Find the genius in each child and let each child, attracted to their genius. My 14-year-old that I'm talking about, she hates school. She does not like reading. She does not like, but she's very athletic. And when she finds something she likes, she'll latch onto it and she'll crush it. But if I'm sitting there and telling her to do this and do that, she's going to rebel and she's going to hate school. Your two sons who walked in right now, how is it we can put those kids in school for 8 hours and expect them to sit watching? It's not even natural. It makes no sense whatsoever. And everyone has ADHD. No, the whole system is not created for education. And there's no education involved. It's more of indoctrination. And that's the problem with the school system right now. So your child, you may be saying to yourself, oh, he's struggling in school. Find out what he or she really likes and let them do more of that, because they'll gravitate towards that. They'll get confidence around that. They'll start to enjoy that. Then they'll see other things. And the other thing is, math may not be a fun topic for most kids, but make it relatable to life skills. Bring them out. Let them see when they go to the store how much money, how much change they need to make. Make it practical. Because if they're sitting there reading something, they're like, we all went through it. Why do I need to know calculus? I don't want to learn it if I'm not going to be able to use it. So when the kids are younger, teach them skills that they're going to be able to learn as they go throughout life, and find out what their geniuses are and focus on what they really like. And don't be afraid of other subjects, because they'll catch up. I mean, we rarely did sciences during our school years for homeschooling in high school. It's just more challenging. But now my 17-year-old is going to massage school and she's learning all about pain management, body work. She's learning all about bones and skeletal. She loves that stuff now. We never really went hard into it, but now she's found a passion to it, and that's what she's going to school for. So find out what they like and focus on that.
Awesome. Yeah, it's hard to I think it's hard sometimes to separate what we like versus what they like, and that's a it goes almost to what you were talking about with your dad. Like, were you am I in the restaurant because am I living my dad's dream or my dream, or like, is this actually what I want to do? And it took a major life change of losing your father to really start thinking about those things. But for me, this was one of the, leaving the military was one of my major life changes. Well, getting married was massive, because I was very paycheck to paycheck before I got married. So talk about a whirlwind of a change, marrying the woman I did, right?
Yeah.
What a great opportunity that was. And then, leaving the military, another big one. It was like having those moments to be able to sit back and reflect and look at what you're doing. And I'm taking the opportunity now with the homeschool to do the same thing. Like, what have I been exposing my kids to? What would I like to expose my kids to? What opportunities have been taken from them? One of them seemed to be actually enjoying being a child, right? Like, I mean, my son, I felt like he was at school 50 hours a week, which he really was. Like, between the drive to school, sitting down in class, coming home, doing more homework. I'm like, he's in third grade.
Yes.
He's in third grade and he's got 2 hours of homework.
Yes.
It baffled my mind.
And think about that. Most of us go to work. We work less hours at a job than what the average child is going to. And then every child has to be in every single sport. They all have to do, travel. I think travel sports is actually the demise of the family, because you're out there, going to, travel hockey or travel basketball. Great. But when you have 6 kids, you can't do that. Oh, you guys like gymnastics? There's 3 of you are going to be in gymnastics. Oh, you like tennis? 3 of you are going to be into tennis. And that's what we did. We never let that ruin our weekends or ruin our things. That's just the way we looked at it. And I think it's important what really fits with your family. Just think about that, because I think most of us get caught up in these sports and all this other stuff and all this extracurricular stuff. It's all busy and it's always taking time away from the family. And I guess one of our core values is we want to spend time with the family. That's why we homeschool. The kids have such a great relationship amongst themselves that's what was important to us. The 9-year-old loves the 23-year-old. They have a great relationship. If they went to school, they'd never see each other. They really wouldn't have a close relationship. So that's the reason why we chose to homeschool.
No, I love it. I mean, it was my wife that took some convincing to do the homeschool thing. For me, I'm like, I left the military to be able to spend time with my family. I don't want to keep losing these hours.
Yes.
And one of my friends in GoBundance, Aaron Amuchastegui, he and his wife wrote a book called The 5-Hour School Week. And one of the things she talked about in that book was we're getting when you send your child to school, you're basically getting the worst of your child, and the child's getting the worst of you, because you wake up in the morning and you're rushing to get out the door, and is this made? Do you have your clothes on? Have you brushed your teeth yet? You're driving to school. You drop them off. They go through all the stuff they're going through. You come home. You do your work. You do all your stuff. You go back and pick them up. And now both of you guys are spent, and you got to sit down and do an hour or 2 of homework. Neither one of you guys are excited to do the hour or 2 of homework, and you're both drained. And then let's rush through dinner. Oh no, never mind. We got to go to soccer practice first. We'll grab dinner at Chick-fil-A on the way, and then it's like you never get your family.
Yes. That sounds tiring, by the way. And I'm tired listening to what you just say. You imagine doing that. I never did that, by the way. So for us, you really need between 2 and 3 solid hours a day of school. If you're going to homeschool, you need between, I'd say, 3 hours tops. Because if you think of all the time spent getting to school, in between periods, recess, lunch, break, if they put in 3 hours out of that 8-hour school day, that's a lot of work. So don't think you need to spend all the time sitting there the whole day. You were up by 8 o'clock. You could probably be done before lunch. And if you want to take a break, go back to lunch afterwards for a little bit. It definitely is a lifestyle. And I think you'll see that how much more connected you'll be with your kids and how much more connected your kids will be amongst themselves as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I mean, even this summer, just watching the two of them play together. And now, we have a daughter now, 3 months old, as she's growing up, she's going to be able to see this and be involved a little bit more. And they love being with her.
Yes.
So now, so I want to take I love the fact that they're close. I love that. I don't want to take that. To your point, they're going to spend 8 hours a day at school and never see each other. And it's, why do that to them? So plus I love to travel. So if I could drag them around with me, I travel the world without my kids. So now I'd like to travel the world with my kids.
Yes.
So if I could drag them with, I'd what better history lesson than to go to Philadelphia and go walk through where all of our
Mm-hmm.
documents were written and see the Liberty Bell and do all that. Okay, we just finished history class for the week.
Yeah.
Man, what a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
But all right, so I'm sure we'll come back to homeschool because it's very fresh on my brain at the moment. But you said that your 14-year-old already had a job. Is that with you, employed by you, or is there another job that she's doing?
She was in gymnastics and she was really good and they just liked her. And at 14 years old, she was offered the job. And the problem was the job was really challenging for her because they threw her in a room with 4 and 5-year-olds. And here's a 14-year-old with 15 4 and 5-year-olds. She has no training. She'd come home deathly afraid. And she's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And, old Gino would say, you gotta suck it up. You gotta stick there. It's your job. You need to do that. The newer one, I had sympathy and I had compassion for her. I'm like, and she'd cry. She must be really, and she's an awesome gymnast, but she didn't have the tools at 14 years old to be able to help these 4 and 5-year-olds. It's not like she had other people help working with her. So for her, she did it for about 6 months. She saw how challenging that was. She's like, oh man, I don't want to do that job anymore, which is great. And I think it's important that she learned that lesson. So the next job she looks for, she can look for something else. My son, when we moved to Florida, I had him go work at a restaurant. Actually, Salt Life. Remember Salt Life where me and you were having that lunch that day? He went to work at that whole restaurant for about a year as a busboy, making $9 an hour and by himself for lunch, up and down. And it was a hard job. And by the end of it, he's like, Dad, I don't want to do that anymore. I'm like, well, Mike, you have to go to college. You're going to have to invest in real estate because if you don't do that, you're going to have to be a busboy. Then he went and got a job at another high-end restaurant, enjoyed it, liked it, was really good at it. But you want to instill that hard work ethic in the children. My 17-year-old has yet to get a job. It's been challenging to get a job in Florida, but she's going to college. And like I said, all the kids are different. My 12-year-old was ready to work 3 years ago. So as soon as she turns 14, she's going to Publix. She'll figure it out. She's just she's great at school. She's great at making friends, and she's gonna love the job.
Awesome. So it's 14 in Florida to be able to work?
It is 14. And the thing is, when you're homeschooled, you can't work during school hours. Because you can't,
even if you're homeschooled,
you're supposed to be at school. So I mean, basically, she should be working. You're like, hey, Mom, I'm done with school. It's 12 o'clock, but that's one of the labor laws, so she won't be able to do. But we'll figure it out. Yeah.
Have you thought about putting the kids to work for you inside of one of the businesses with you?
They have. I mean, Gabriella, and I'm a tough boss. I wasn't a good boss to them. And it's funny, I would catch myself sometimes yelling at her. And because I want this video done. She did a lot of video recording, a lot of editing. And one day my wife's like, do you speak to your employees like that? I'm like, no, you've got a point. Never really have spoken to my employees like that. But I had, so what gave me the right to be able to speak to my kids that way? And it was an enlightening moment for me. And I just had to realize, why was I doing that? Oh, maybe it's because I got it from my father and the way I was treated, because that's just how the old generation would be able to do it. And I'm like, okay, that was an enlightening moment. And the kids still do work. They still do work inside the business. They come to all the events. They help with the books sometimes. They'll help with some kind of video, some kind of editing. So I'm more than open for them to work. And my son is investing in our deals as well. So he's investing in our deals. And what I would love, haven't told him yet, but I would love is when he graduates college to go up to Tennessee and work 6 months in property management just to see the inner workings of the business and just to get an idea of it right now. Because he's really intelligent as far as spreadsheets, as far as underwriting, as far as capital. He gets all that component of the business, probably a little asset management, but I want him to property manage. And because I wanted to see that it's such an important component of the business and that property managers have a tough job. I mean, you know, when you're sitting in an office and you're air conditioning, your asset manager, you're saying, why do property managers, why aren't they pulling that through? Well, it's a hard job. It's a thankless job because if you're doing a great job, they're going to fire you because they're going to sell the property. And if you're doing a bad job, they're going to fire you because you're not doing the right job. So it's a hard and challenging job. So for him, like you had spoken before, to have empathy and to see the other side, it's always good to be part of the other side. If you're going to be a leader, go through those trials and those tribulations, learn what it is to be that way. So when you're actually running a business or you have your investments, you'll understand what they're going through. So you'll be able to empathize with their struggles and maybe you'll be able to bring something to the table.
That's awesome. And I think the way you guys are structured too, because you guys are vertically integrated and everything, that helps on that property management side too. Like they have the desire to actually be good.
Oh yeah.
And not worry about you selling it, right? Because you guys are my employees. You're going to hang out with me regardless.
Yes.
And I want all of my properties to be strong. So you guys have actually inspired. I really want to do that with my real estate and build it up in a vertically integrated way, because it just, like, I could see that being the pathway to much greater success and continuity across your properties. Is that kind of why you guys did that, or what was the beginnings of you guys going to that route?
Oh, when Jake and I got together, Adam, as God is my witness, we said, all we need is 100 units. We'll be thrilled. We'll be happy. I mean, we hit 100 units, within 3 years of knowing each other. But I always had in the back of my mind that I didn't want to become the next Bernie Madoff, the next massive hedge. I didn't want that in my life. I just wanted enough money.
I definitely don't want to be the next Bernie Madoff.
You know what I'm saying? But Bernie, before he became Bernie, was super successful. Yeah. He was making 50 to 60 mil a year. He was actually a really, in the psychology of money, how much is enough? When is enough enough? We need to ask ourselves that question. I think Bernie never asked himself that question. It was more going down into that psychosis and just, that whole ego. For me and Jake, early on, we just wanted to focus on PPU, profit per unit. We wanted to have a vertically integrated company where we could buy a couple of deals a year. That's all we've done. 2 to 3 deals a year for the last 10 years. Continue to grow slow, methodically, like the book Small Giants by Bo Burlingham. I recommend everyone to read it. We didn't need to be the next Facebook or the next Uber. We wanted to have profitable businesses, and every property that we bought made financial and fiscal sense. We're able to refi it out, able to hold it for the long term. That was our strategy. That's what we wanted. And I think it's worked well for us. We've been able to grow and not outgrow our infrastructure. Like the Chick-fil-A. If you look at the Chick-fil-A model, they've been around for 40 years. They started out in Atlanta. Then from Atlanta, they went to the Southeast, then regional, then national. But it's taken them a long time. And for us, I think we're successful because we haven't outgrown our infrastructure. We haven't done deals that don't make sense. And maybe passed up on a couple of deals where we weren't ready, where we didn't have the right people in place. Over the last 3 years, I mean, the pandemic has been hard to find employees, to find supply chain problems. So some deals may have made sense, but at the time we can't take them on because we can't staff properly. We don't have enough supply. We're trying to turn these units. We can't turn them. So for us, focusing on what we have, not outgrowing that infrastructure, has really led to some amazing profitability, some amazing deals. And now that we're starting to continue to grow our revenue projections, we want to grow at 20% a year. That's what we're looking to do year over year. Nice. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but if you think rent growth is between 3 and 4% a year,
solid.
that's what I'm saying there. And then all you need to do is a couple hundred units a year because we're not really selling anything. So if we sell something, we'll need to replace it. But that, and also having our employees, if they've been working with us for the last 2 years, to be able to invest in those deals as well, that's pretty great because we don't believe in 401ks. But hey, you're a property manager, you're working with us for 2 years, invest in the deal because you're going to materially participate in this deal. And then, like your shirt says, capitalism kicks in and like, oh, wow, we need to raise rents. Now they understand ownership. They understand risk. They understand working hard and trying to create revenue and trying to create NOI in that property because they own part of the property. So that really has been really helpful for us in the last, I guess, 6 or 7 deals that we've been able to have our employees invest with us.
Yeah, I was. You guys were kind enough to let me in on the SkillBridge program for the last 6 months
yes.
in the military, and it was awesome to watch that and see what your folks talking about it on their L10s and in the meetings and everything. It was really cool to see. It yet another thing that I was motivated by. I was like, man, I really like that concept because, man, literal ownership do people then take on their job, right? Because now they're literally owning part of the work that they're doing.
Yes.
And like so much more aspiration to keep this thing driving forward and keep it driving forward. And I'm interested though, if you're open to going into it, how did you guys structure those into for like the employee benefit side of the house? Like, is it just did you guys still have same minimums for investments, or how do you guys actually structure that?
So what we ended up doing was we ended up creating like a syndication structure. I mean, equal, there's no waterfall, there is no fees, but it basically technically is a syndication because we're taking money from a lot of the employees without an expectation of them doing any work. They may be working, but they may not be working on that property. So we just created a syndication structure, PPM, offering memorandum, sent the whole thing out, and it's dollar for dollar. And if they've been with the company for at least 2 years, they can invest as much capital as they can afford to. The cool thing about it is, the last deal we just did was a $10.5 million deal. We needed to raise a little under $3 million. Me, Jake, and my partner bought about 80% of the deal. We left 20% open for the employees. And whoever, I think there's probably 15 or 20 employees that qualify. They've been there for at least 2 years. And what I like about it is we got a couple of Jake and Gino guys, investing in the deal. And that makes me really happy, really proud, because if you're going to sell Buicks, you better buy Buicks. If you're selling multifamily education, I want you to invest in our deals to see the benefits and to be bought into the thing. So for us, it's a win-win all around. They're buying great deals. They're putting their money where their mouth is, and they're actually able to say with credibility, I invest in multifamily. I want to teach other people, and I want to sell education on multifamily because I believe in the vehicle.
Yeah, and I very much believe in the vehicle as well, and I think that having that buy-in, similar like with the education company itself, like you better have gone through the education, know why we're pushing what we're pushing, because there's like it just brings out a different passion in you when you actually, there's a book, Good to Great, that talks about like level 5 leaders and what it is inside of those people that are really pushing pushing themselves properly and helping move the company in the right way and having that passion behind it. I forgot which company it was they were talking about. It was like, I don't know, like we'll say, Johnson & Johnson, like with deodorant and stuff, like, or whoever it was, right? And they, in the book, he was talking about like they passed up on a person because they just didn't seem passionate enough about the deodorant, Like they need to be passionate and be there for the right. Like if you have that belief in your company, you're going to have such a better group of people that are helping you push the company forward. Have you? I know you guys are running on EOS on the property management side and everything. Do you run EOS on Jake and Gino side as well?
Very similar. Yeah, we've used scaling up with Rockefeller Habits and the Vern Harnish method. So we're using both. So it's really a crossover, and that's the great thing about it. Whatever we're learning on the education side, like you're having these podcasts, I'm able to bring it over into the property management side. A lot of the stuff that we've learned as investors and learned as property managers, we're learning it from the student base and from other podcasts. So that's the amazing part. I mean, the part that you struggle with when you're becoming a leader is to try to be a visionary. You want to be able to lead people and you want to be able to create a vision, but we're all stuck in the daily business. But to be able to provide that vision, and for me, the education company, the vision is pretty easy. We're affecting thousands of families. I mean, we've had like 120 students have actually quit their W-2 jobs and gone into it full time. I mean, students have closed over 70,000 units. I mean, that's the vision, guys. We're here to help other people attain that level of success that we have. You want to be part of that. And I think most people would say, yeah, I want to be part of an organization that's vibrant, that's trying to help others. And that's what I think a leader has to want to aspire to and has to show that vision. And I think building the culture and the core values within the organization takes a little bit of time. I think you need to flesh those out. And those are really, really important. That's why I only had one restaurant for 20 years. And within 5 years, I had 1,500 units. It's not that simple, but at the same time, it sort of is that simple. It's not easy, but it is that simple. I didn't have that framework, that North Star. And once I've understood that, the education company it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of people in the space. I just think we've created a great platform and a great community. And I think we believe in what we're doing. And I think long term will be great.
Yeah. And I'll say that I'm one of those people for sure that you've made a massive difference in. So I think long term, you're on the right track. Even, let me see. Here's your guys' first syndication.
Yes.
Thing here. Yeah.
That was a nice deal, wasn't it? I love that deal.
Yeah, that was a good deal for sure. Yeah, I like that one a lot. And there was, let me see. Here on this shelf, the things you guys send out.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Absolutely love it. But I think the amount of impact that is made also, and I think sharing that with your team, I'm sure is super helpful to make sure that they are aware of what's going on and how much of an impact you make, and the amount of success that the students have had. What do you guys have like inside your, whether it's quarterly meetings or whatever it is, to kind of share those successes among the team to help keep everybody motivated? Oh, and there was one more question before that I wanted to ask. The reason the EOS thing was the core values. Like, how did you guys create your core values? So however you want to work that out. So either core values or meetings, however you want to go about
core
that.
values were a little challenging. We actually had coaching with the scaling up people. It took about 2 quarters. We would sit down, we'd write down what we really held true, what we really believed in. It's not a marketing ploy. It's not a marketing pitch.
Mm-hmm.
We came up with people first, unwavering ethics, extreme ownership, growth mindset, and make it happen. Those were our core values. We came up with BHAGs that have been, changed around our big, hairy, audacious goals. Ours at Jake and Gino's, I want to be able to affect and, help 1,000 people quit their W-2 jobs by the year 2030. That's something that's one of my big, hairy, audacious goals. And, our mission statement is we create communities that empower people to be the best versions of themselves, whether you're in the property management side. At the time, we're syndicating for our investor base, Jake and Gino for our students. So once you clear that out, you really need to dive deep. And if it's something that you don't think you can do, coaching is great because it'll hold you accountable. You'll get the work done. You'll put in the reps and you'll block the time out to do it. Because I know there's not enough hours in a day to do this stuff. But if you don't work on this stuff early on as you're scaling up, you're going to turn around and go and say, I've got 500 units and I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I have no systems. I've got nothing. And it's going to be really hard for me to employ people. And it's going to be really hard for me to employ vendors and even people that you're trying to put in residents or living in your property. You won't have control of any of that stuff. And that's what happened with Jake and myself. At about the 600 unit level, we're like, we need to change. Jake can't be going out to all the properties. We have to figure something out here. And it was a relatively large investment, probably one of the best investments we've ever made in education for scaling the company. But we need to do that. Start out with Traction. Traction's great. Read the book, implement those. But once you start paying for coaching and you start getting on those calls and having those meetings every quarter with your coaches, it really opens up to another level because now all of a sudden you've got skin in the game. When you got skin in the game, you're not going to waste that money. You're not going to waste that time. So if you're doing it by yourself, it may feel good and you may do really well, but deep down inside that accountability, when you have to meet somebody on a call, you're not going to drop that call. You're going to get that work done for the call.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's one thing that I've had a couple coaches and I want to dig in a little bit more and have a more, I don't know what the right word is, but I definitely need to go and get another coach to be able to push me to another level. Like I feel like I'm at a point right now where like it's the old saying, what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah.
What got you to $1 million won't get you to 10 million, won't get you to 10 million, won't get you to 100 million. Like I need some other tools, and reading the books and trying to figure it out myself is not necessarily going to be the way I'm doing it because I've read, a couple hundred books over the last 2 years and like, it's okay.
It can, but it'll take a lot longer. It will take a lot longer, and then you have limiting beliefs. And I think just getting into different rooms, joining with different mentorship groups. That's why people say education is never a waste. You'll always learn something. And it's not even that. It's the networking and it's the people that you meet in those rooms. All of a sudden, I'm like, hey, the pizza guy's got how many units? The drug reps, if he can do it, then I can do it. And that's the whole idea of that. And then you're meeting people within that community, and then you're getting these ideas. We had an event a couple months ago, last month in July, and we had the manager right. And I was struggling with this whole no smoking policy. We want to do a no smoking policy in all of our properties in Tennessee. And I'm like, Tennessee, no one's going to go for that. And we had a student there, and he's like, dude, I just did it in one of my Kentucky properties. And Kentucky's the tobacco king of the world. He's like, best thing I ever did. I thought there'd be a little bit of pain. Some residents that were there didn't like it, but the new residents, they're all for it. You're saving on your turns. There's no smell.
Yeah.
There's that. I'm like, oh, so if I didn't have the community or I wasn't able to be in that room and to hear him, I may not pull the trigger and do that, or I may take a lot longer to do that. Now that we know that that's a possibility and it's been done and other people are doing it, it's like, okay, game on. We're going to start testing it and rolling out to some of our properties. So that's just the power of getting in the right room and trying to expand that mindset of, hey, I can't do that. How can I do that? Or who can help me to do that?
When are you going to start implementing that?
That's a good question. It's one of those things with the priorities. So we're in the middle of the quarter. Maybe we make that a Q4 priority. It's one of those things where you become a machine gunner and you start throwing too many priorities onto your team. When you start doing too many, you end up doing none. So that's something where I know, and I think Q4 is probably going to be the test run for that policy.
Okay. Yeah, because too many priorities mean no priorities.
That's right. Yeah.
So, it's hard to be a priority if it's one of 15.
Yes.
How have you kind of scaled that to, how do you prioritize throughout a quarter or at the beginning of your quarter? What is your process for prioritizing what you're doing? Obviously some things are a fire. You have to get the fire extinguisher, you can put it out, but that's not like a priority. That's an urgent situation. What's your process like to be able to create your priorities for a quarter?
So every quarter we do have a day where we pull aside the executive teams. We had Rand Partners. We've got Jake and Gino and Rand Property Management. We get together for the day. A priority is anything that takes 8 or more hours to pull through. A task is things that you need to do to pull the priority. So if you need to create a website, that is a priority. It's going to take you more than 8 hours. Then when you're at the quarterly meeting, you decide what priorities you need to work on. And then from there down, you start assigning the person to the priority. Because if 2 people are, ahead of that priority, then nobody's accountable. So you have to have one person with that priority. It depends upon where you are in the business. For Jake and Gino, it usually comes down to sales and marketing. So those are our priorities, always to come up with different marketing campaigns, come up with different ideas. Last quarter, we just launched the website. So that priority was a massive one because we've got thousands of articles and blogs. So that bled over into the next quarter. In 2020, when COVID came about, we're through March, April. We didn't have video leasing, virtual leasing. We didn't have that on, but all of a sudden we knew we needed it because you couldn't go out and show units. So be flexible. If something does pop up and it has to get done like that, we'll do it. Don't worry about it's not that. Put something on the shelf and implement that right away. I would see what you're lacking in your business, what you need to drive the business forward. And for us, at one point in the property management company, we're always doing different things, whether we're working on property logs. You've seen the weekly pulses, continue to rise those, working on building a CapEx team or another CapEx team, working on vendor management, whatever ends up popping up. This quarter, we're working on a shed where we can start doing more videos for our trainings, for our maintenance team. So we're doing that. Depends upon what you're doing. Let's say you're taking over property. Right now, we worked on this takeover doc. It took over a quarter to do the doc. Now every time we do take over a property, we're using that doc. So whatever you see holes in the business, and I would say probably depending on the size of your team, no more than 4 or 5 really big priorities a quarter, because I think once you try to do more, it can get really challenging. And then every week we get in our weekly executive meetings, huddles, Mondays, 8:00. We go over them for 45 minutes. What did Jake and Gino's team do this week? What did Rand Partners do? What did Rand Property Management do? We all give each other updates. And it's more like a weekly huddle where we're sort of supporting each other. And for 13 weeks, you're going through those. So you're always top of mind. I need to work on these priorities. I've got other stuff going on in the business. Here's fires here, but I need a couple hours a week to work on these priorities. And that's how you get to pull them through.
I really love the shed thing you just said, because like you're almost pulling from Jake and Gino and putting it into Rand, right? And saying, hey, we do education. This is what we do. Let's do education for our company. And is that something you guys just now started, or have you guys been doing like video education for your team? We have a whole
training platform on Kajabi for Rand Property Management. So there's maintenance, like how to change a toilet, how to change the thermostat, those kinds of things. So the training, but we want to bring the training to the next level. And also we're doing leadership training as well for property managers, and also leasing and helping property managers as far as leasing and sales as well. So we're building those out because we want to constantly have training systems to be able to train the employees. It's hard. You employ somebody new. It's like, okay, what do I do now? And you want to be able to retain the employees. And I think not having a plan for the employees, I would challenge everybody out there to go read the book, Never Lose an Employee by Joey Coleman. He just came out with another book. He had the book called Never Lose a Customer. And it was about the customer journey. He just launched one about the employee journey. And it's important when you're hiring employees to have them see your vision, but also to be able to give them a platform to be able to succeed. So if they come in and there's no training, there's no diligence, you're not giving any guidance, no expectations, well, that employee is going to ultimately leave. But that's what we're trying to do with our company. We're trying to give them the training and the tools to be able to be successful in their business, in their role.
I love that. I'm some solid notes on that section. So one other thing, I want to go back to the core value thing. You'd mentioned quite a bit ago that like a core value for your family. Did you go through an exercise with your family as well, similar to the core values thing with the business, or is this more of just like a inherent core value inside the family?
I had a partner who you used to work with. He created something called a family placemat. I don't even know if it's still out there, but it's really a placemat where he puts his core values, he puts his rhythms for his family. I didn't go that far. I just knew that the core values for our family is, go to church every Sunday. That was really important for us, whether we're on vacation or so. That's something that we aspire to do. Eating together. That's something that we will always do together. Homeschooling is another one. So for us, it's not as structured as the business. And for me and my wife, we're always together. So, Jake does level 10 meetings with his wife every Sunday on Sunday. And that's something that if you're not in wavelength with your wife, then maybe that's something you do. But I'm literally with my wife every day. She sees my calendar. We even do podcasts together. So she knows what's going on. So I don't need that level of attention. But you can run your business, your family, like the business. It really is the same thing. They're living, growing entities. They're constantly changing. What you knew when your child was 2, you're going to be a different parent when your child is 22. So you need to continue to process and continue to learn, continue to be flexible as well. And for us, it just, I don't want to say it came naturally, but she was home raising the kids, and then I'm coming home. We have that great open relationship. We're able to communicate. So if you're having struggles with the communication aspect of it, set up a level 10 meeting. Maybe do a quarterly priority with your children. My friend Jim Shields wrote a book called 18 Summers. It's a great book.
I love that
really
book.
simple book, but I mean, I don't know, like whoever thought about doing a quarterly meeting with your kid and let them choose whatever they want to do. You want to go to the park, you want to go on trampolines for the day, whatever you want to do, and you spend that time 4 times a year, 4 days with each child. I mean, that is a great way to bond, a great way to build. And to be able to build those rhythms within your business, you should be able to build them within your family as well. So,
yeah, that was actually one of the books that started my thought process on homeschooling too. Because if I only have 18 summers with them, like,
yes,
there's what a shocking statement to hear, right? And put it in that perspective. And I've sold that to a few people now that are, not business oriented. They want to, family board meetings and things like that when it comes to their brains. But to put it in that perspective, like, man, oh man, like how crazy is that?
But Adam, the power with that is, I get what Jim is saying with 18 summers, but you create a great relationship that even if they get older, like my daughter's 23, she is a missionary right now, but she's coming to Italy with us in 2 weeks because she wants to hang out with us. If she doesn't go back to missionary work, she can come back home and live with us at home because we have that kind of relationship. So the first 18 years are great for formative. They will leave and they will get older, but they will come back. And they're going to want to come back because you've created the time and you've spent the time and the effort into that relationship. That's what it's all about. It's not all doom and gloom. If your kids are 16 years old, you're like, I only got 2 years left. Well, make those 2 years freaking powerful. So when they do turn 18, they want to come back.
And that's something I talked to my wife about, was like, if we crush those 18 summers in the right way, like we're going to have 50 more summers after that because they're going to want to come home and see me. Like it's, they're going to want to be around. I love being around my parents. My parents moved to Florida a couple of years ago. So now they're like 40 minutes from me. It's wonderful. My wife's family, like her brother lives literally 5 minutes away. Like we're near family. And we love being around family. So if we foster that in our family, we're going to be able to hopefully keep that for years and years and decades to come. One thing that I think you and I did very well is we married up. So tell me, you have like a what seems to be obviously, I don't live in the house with you, but a fantastic relationship with your wife. You guys have you seem to communicate well. Obviously, not everything is rainbows and butterflies in any relationship, but talk to me a little bit about the dynamic between you and your wife, and like how you guys manage the family, as well as like communicate with each other about kids, and like maybe. Not in this particular example, but like, I really want to do homeschool and I don't want to do homeschool at all. How does the communication aspect work between you guys to make sure that you're fostering the right relationship with each other and representing well for your kids?
I think I can honestly say that my wife probably saved my soul, because early on I was more into the materialistic. I was more into making the money and less into, I wouldn't say family, but that wasn't my focus. I was focused on just supporting and providing for the family. And, she kept telling me, God's going to provide. Don't worry about it. She had a different outlook on money that I did. And as the years grew, I just made her understand my outlook on money, and she started adopting, well, what's financial freedom? Well, financial freedom is doing what you want, when you want. You want your mom to come down? Mm-hmm. I can fly her down. Oh, you want to have somebody come over and do a sabbatical for a month? Well, I can get them an Airbnb. It's not gonna kill me. So I think being open and trying to explain your side, I think for us men, we're always trying to solve and trying to fix. That's not the name of the game. The name of the game is to be able to listen. I think that's the problem. And once I went to life coaching school, that's when it really helped me out as far as relationships, because all of a sudden I became a better listener. I became more in tune with my feelings and understanding what was going on with me. But even early on, my wife trusted me with a lot of things, trusted me with the work, trusted me with our investments, trusted me with when I decided to leave the restaurant. And I had massive trust for her. When she wanted to have a baby at home, I'm like, you want to have a home birth? What is that? I don't even know what and the pressure from the family to like, you're crazy. And that's been my whole life, because I've homeschooled, home birth, real estate, that's all foreign to most people. And the pressure, we had a podcast with Brad Lee, and he used the word allodoxophobia. Never heard of what that word was. You know what that is? Because I was asking him, how do you build a brand? And allodoxophobia is the fear of other people's opinions. And if you go through life and you're always worried about what other people think, it's going to be challenging. But if you have a spouse that you believe in and that you trust, it'll make those decisions a lot easier. When we started homeschooling, no one was homeschooling. I was the weird guy. I had the restaurant. I had public school teachers coming in and asking me, well, where does your kid go to school? And I'm like, I homeschool. And they looked at me like I was nuts. And same thing. I had construction people would come in. They're all, where do your kids go to school? So they thought I was the weird guy. And that was really challenging, really tough. But I knew that my wife really believed in it. She did a great job. She excelled at it. So that's where I think part of the relationship comes in. You need to trust that person. But at the same time, my wife is giving me the trust that I'm going to invest our money and that I'm going to go into real estate. So I worked really hard to get into multifamily. I was in mentorship groups. I'd be working 45 to 50 hours a week at the restaurant, another 20 hours on multifamily. So you need to show that you're living up to your end of the bargain by saying, I want to do this. You have to put in the effort and put in the work. My wife, when she had the home births, super healthy. She was really in shape. She really knew what she had to do. She picked out some really great midwives. She owned it. So that's why I felt comfortable. Okay, it's your decision. I go by the decision. I see all the work and all the effort you're putting to it, and I see how important it is to you. So how can I say no to that? I mean, that's not really fair. It's something that you really believe in, that you really worked hard. And it's the same thing with her and the real estate. You're not letting me buy this 25 unit with Jake. You've seen how much work and how much effort I've put into it. She trusted me. And that first deal, obviously led to a lot of other deals. I think trust and putting hard work and showing that you're really committed to what you're saying you're going to do is really important in the relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree. The trust side of the house, honestly, the more trust you have, the easier the communication gets too, right? Because you're not afraid of what the other person's going to say, because you trust that they're going to hear it properly. You're going to have that relationship back and forth. And if they're not understanding that, they'll be able to ask questions back. You'll be able to ask questions back and forth. It's for me, I think that I have a very hard time trusting most people as a whole. Just given my background and some of the things I've done in my life, I just don't trust people naturally. Like even jumping into your community, right? It took me going to St. Augustine to sit down with you, to have lunch before I could actually trust getting in the group. Like, is this person real? Is this person actually I hear him on a podcast, I hear him on a thing, but I had to have that shaking your hand and sitting down and talking to you to really feel comfortable with it. And like, how much more important is it to have that with your wife? I mean, golly, like it for too many people. I mean, I look at I'm so glad I'm not dating right now, because like all these apps and you're swiping and doing all these things. And like, I just like, whatever happened to actually going and talking to somebody and meeting them and understanding who they are? And then don't even get me started on all the filters and all the stuff, because now I don't even know what you look like. We could have been dating on the phone for a year, and I go meet you in person, and I'm like, I don't know who you are. I know this person, but it ain't you. Like, I don't, like, it just boggles my mind. But man, oh man, like building that trust up front, and it goes across to business too. Like, if you don't trust your business partner. I mean, I've had some not so great business partners multiple times throughout my short business career, short quote unquote business career. But man, oh man, like if you do the due diligence up front before you get married, know who they are, have the right things lined up. Same thing with your partners. You scored pretty well with your wife and your business partner, like you mentioned. So two well done jobs there. What would you say your wife would say to that question, as far as like the communication side of it, and making sure you guys are like, how open you guys are to that?
Well, we just did a presentation for Family Mastermind for Matt Anderson's group, Matt Andrews' group. I'm sorry, and just a couple hours ago, and we were talking and revisiting our past, and I think the first several years, the relationship, the communication wasn't great. I mean, I was a selfish person early on. I remember back in 1999, I'm living in my mom's basement, and I am working 6 days a week at the restaurant. She's pregnant with our first child. I'm building a house too at the same time. So I'm stressed out. I'm tired. I come home, there's no lunch ready. So I'm like, where's lunch? She goes, I couldn't make it. I don't feel good. So I proceeded to start cooking lunch for myself. Had lunch, had a nice piece of ham. I didn't make anything for her. I look back at that. I'm like, wow, we're a really not a good person at the time. But I was young, and I chalk it up to just being immature and childish. If you're not embarrassed of the person you were 10 years ago, that means you really didn't grow that much. So I ended up growing a lot. I ended up learning a lot. It took me a long time. But I think the one thing that she understood is I was always committed to her. I always loved her. I would always back her up. So I didn't fall on those things. I just was more of an immature, and the way I was raised. I mean, Italians have a certain mindset, and that mindset is really difficult to break. And, once you get into it, you're really, as a marriage, you're really committed to the person. I was always committed to her. I'd always do whatever I could to provide. And I think that's ultimately what, I don't want to say saved us, but that's what strengthened the relationship. And then as you go on down this personal development journey, and as you become a life coach, and you start questioning things, and you start looking at things, and what I would say to anybody listening right now is, why do you act the way you do? Go back into your childhood, see the trauma that you had, because we've all had trauma, some more than others, and it may not be huge trauma. I didn't have huge trauma when I was a child, but still, your parents do mess you up. And you're going to mess your kids up, and that's okay. But I think if you don't understand that, why is she always yelling at me? Why is she so sensitive? Well, maybe when she was young, she was always criticized and she was always thrown aside, so that every time I bring something up that's feeling uncomfortable to her, or I'm criticizing her, maybe she flies off the handle, or maybe she gets really. I'm just using that as an example. It's more of my thing, where when I was young growing up, I had older cousins and I was always getting blamed on. And finally, when I was 14 years old, my mom was like, that's it. I had enough. I could see you're not the one at risk. But that still sticks with you. So every time somebody criticizes you, especially a loved one, like your wife, and says, why are you doing that? I take it personally. I can take criticism from a lot of other people. But when it comes from somebody who's really near and dear to me, I sometimes revert back to that. Well, why are you criticizing me? What did I do wrong? And it's just something I think we need to be aware of. We live in our subconscious so much. We do so many things automatically without thinking about it, because that's how we survive. Because if you had to think about every single decision, your brain would blow up. So you're on autopilot for most of the day. But sometimes it's good to pull the brakes. And why am I acting like that? Why did I get mad at her for saying that? But when Johnny G says something to me, I don't get as upset. It's important. It's important. And that's part of the communication. That's part of the reflection. And that's part of the personal growth and the journey that we're all on.
So as you were doing your personal growth journey, like, was you, as a weird of way of saying this as it is, like, was your wife on that same journey with you, or did you ever feel like you were outgrowing your wife, or your wife outgrew you, and like how you guys kept up with each other?
We went to real estate event in December of 2016. It was in New Jersey, Cranford, New Jersey. We're driving over the Tappan Zee Bridge, which became the Mario Cuomo Bridge. It takes us 2.5 hours to get there. We go downstairs. There's about 50 people at this event, and I present. Don't even remember what I did. Afterwards, she's sitting there. She still had no idea really what I did. What does Gino do? He's real estate, coaching, buying properties. People started coming up to her. She tells me, people are crying, like, your husband did such an amazing job, and he's really changed my life and all. And she's like, what do you do? I'm like, I'm just a life coach. And I had gone down that journey. I had already practiced some of the skills of asking great questions and really being an active listener. And she's like, this life coaching thing sounded a little woo-woo to me, but let me look into it. And she looked into it. She embraced it. And she went through the whole process. And she's probably a better life coach than I am right now. She's amazing. But I think at a certain level, when she saw the effect that I was having on others, she wanted to learn more. And it wasn't just the effect that I was having on her and our relationship. I was really helping a lot of other people out. And for us, it really helped our relationship a lot. It's almost like the Jake and Gino community and your education community. You think you start to monetize and to make a ton of money, and then you go down another path and go, well, even if I don't make any money on this, it's providing me so much value, so much impact, and so much learning that if I just stayed in the kitchen and just continued to wash dishes and make that little bit of money, my life would have been okay, but I would have missed out on so many things in life.
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. So, I was recently talking to a friend of mine, and he gave me a call out of nowhere. I mean, I borderline just call him an acquaintance, really. I'm not even a friend, but he gave me a call and was asking me for some relationship advice, which I found odd, but let me chat, right? And one of the things, and it's not the first time I'd heard it, it just was the most recent time, where he was like, "Look, I'm doing all this growth. I'm growing. I'm here. I'm growing there, and my wife is just happy being stagnant." And he was struggling with that. And I didn't really know what to how to really coach him through that necessarily. I mean, I do think that, and it's of no fault of my wife. She's still full-time active duty Air Force, so there's only so much, right? So I do feel like sometimes I am outgrowing. I shouldn't say outgrowing. I'm going in a direction a lot faster than she's able to keep up. But we still talk so much, and we have such great communication in the way that we're able to keep the relationship alive. And it didn't sound like in this case they were. So I'm interested, especially with your background, like how would you talk to somebody who feels like they're outgrowing their wife? Because like with folks who are especially entrepreneurs that are guys that are like drive, always wanting to move, and we can have a tendency to leave tread marks over people that we ran over along the way. So how would you talk to somebody like that to be able to pause, like, hey, these are the types of things you need to be thinking
It's
through?
a good question, because are you coaching them or are you consulting them? If you're consulting them, you're giving them advice. If you're coaching them, all you're doing is asking them questions. They have the answers within them. The better questions you ask, the better answers you're going to get from the person. What does outgrowing her look like? Let me know from you. Why do you think? Well, have you ever asked her? Would you like personal growth? What does that look like to her? Stagnant. Stagnant's not a really good picture. You have to really listen to people's words, and words are so powerful. When you think about stagnant, that's not a really good description of somebody in your life. You don't want people to be stagnant. Maybe they feel threatened by your growth. Look back in their childhood. You're looking at your husband. All of a sudden, you're here, and everyone's giving him attention. He's a rock star. She may be sort of being envious or jealous of him doing it, and you don't even know. Maybe he's giving off that aura of, and I'm awesome. There's no I in teamwork. I get on a podcast with my wife. We're not competing against each other. Maybe earlier on in the relationship, my ego would say, I need to outperform her. But as you get older, you're on the same team. You're not really trying to compete. And I think having that open dialogue, I think going to therapy would really help. Therapy's not a bad thing. Therapy's a great thing. If you look back at your past and see what happened, don't get stuck back there, but relive it and see what's going on. Why do you feel the need to grow so much? Is that more important than the relationship? I don't know the answer to that question, but I mean, you really need to dive into her, what's going to make her happy, and then what's going to make you happy. And then if you're committed, there's got to be a way for you both to work this thing out. But I think maybe she may feel a little threatened by that. And all of a sudden she's like, well, he's getting all the accolades and all the envy, and I'm just sitting here not getting anything. She may be self-sabotaging herself. That may be the point. And also my wife, when we started out, was painfully shy. I mean, like, we started a podcast 4 years ago. I would have never thought in a million years my wife would have done a podcast. I had to actually bring her on. She was afraid of doing it and just getting the reps in. I'm saying it's like we're just having a conversation here. Nobody's around. And now she comes to the events. She presents at the events. But I could have made that same excuse. Oh, I'm getting all this growth and my wife is here. Well, maybe she's just afraid. Maybe there's a lot of fear. We'll never be able to conquer our fears. What are you afraid of? Let's talk about that. People are not afraid just to be afraid. They're afraid of the change that they're not going to be prepared for it. Maybe she's got self-conscious when she was in school and people were called on and they made her look stupid in school. That there's a lot of trauma in that. Maybe she was bullied. Maybe she doesn't feel comfortable. So just to say, hey, I'm growing and she's not, well, let's find out what's holding her back, what the block is. And then you're there to support her or there to help her. You're not there to criticize her. I think you need working together, and having no I in that teamwork is so important. Because I see a lot of couples, they're competing. Instead of competing, work together. You can do so much when you work together and you pull your talent and your resources together than you can by yourself.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate that. That'll be, I told him I was going to follow up with him. So now I'm going to have to follow up with him and steal some of these ideas and see what his thoughts are.
Rip off and duplicate, my friend. R&D.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't remember if it was on the podcast we were talking, or if it was the pre-podcast before we actually started recording. But I'd mentioned seeing a lot of 40-year-old boys, right? And it drives me insane to look at in nowadays society what we terms like toxic masculinity and all the type of stuff. It's a lovely road to go down. I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on the situation we find ourselves in, right? I've got two boys that I'm raising to try to be, as I tell them, better men than me. And part of that is to, for me, I look at it very biblically. Like my boys are going to eventually be the leaders of a household. They should be representing the household well. They should be, providing financially for their family. They should be taking care of their wife and kids. That doesn't mean that they're, higher, better, or anything like that. But I know that you and your family, faith is very important. I think you guys are Catholic, correct? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, how do you kind of, the way I usually say it is, if I'm looking to society for my example, I'm looking in the wrong spot. But I'd love to kind of hear your thoughts on, where we're at as men and how we should be kind of looking at our sons in particular, because there's a little bit more of an impact there, but also our daughters, because you have mostly daughters. How should we be representing to our kids as we're growing up in a society that looks the way it does today?
Once again, we interviewed somebody on the Julian Gino show. His name is Jason Everett. His company is called the Chastity Project, chastity.com. And I mean, talk about an eloquent speaker. Talk about somebody who really understands. And I asked him about the toxic. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. I forget the word he uses. I think he used the word effeminacy. What happens is now we're trying to grow men who have these cars and this look, and they look so macho and masculine, but that's not masculinity. That he calls it, I think, the word effeminacy. What happens is you're not doing the hard and going just for the easy route. And I think the picture of a male in the society now is you need to be 6'2", rugged, strong football player. When I don't think you need that. I think the ideal, the typical male is like what you said, the leader of the household. When you're dealing with your daughters, be careful of how you interact and how you deal with them, because they typically will gravitate to that person when they're thinking about dating and marrying. So if you're not acting really great or you're just acting subpar, that's who they're going to be attracted to. And when you listen to Jason speak, he speaks so eloquently on the subject. And I don't think there really isn't anything. We've been being used as scapegoats. And when you don't have a strong male figure in the household, just take a look what's going on with society. Back in the 60s, before the whole civil rights thing, 70+% of black households were dual family, mother and father. Now 70% are single family. What's happened to that? I mean, there's other factors. I'm not saying that's the only factor, but take a look at all the demographics. Single households, there's more poverty. You're talking about not having a role model in the household. Yeah. That is one of the single biggest destructors of society as far as I'm concerned, because you don't have the mother and the father. We are very similar. Mothers and male and female are similar. We have a lot of characteristics. We have a lot of different traits. My wife is a nurturer. She had the baby in the womb for 9 months. She nursed the baby for 3 years. I don't have that kind of connection, I can never have that. That's not in me. But what I do have is a little bit of spirit, a little bit of freedom, a little bit of craziness, right? A little bit of protection, a different kind of love. My daughter who's 23, just wrote me a letter the other day for my birthday. And she said to me in the letter, we fought, we've had issues, but your love is like God's love. When you embraced me and gave me that hug, instead of trying to fix the situation and listen to me, it's like God the Father's love. It's not Mary or a woman. It's a different kind of love. And I think we need to embrace that. And I think if you're in a single family household, it can be difficult. It can be challenging, but embrace the qualities that you have. If you're a male, bring those qualities into the relationship. And I think, the women have that relationship with sons. They have that special relationship. And I think, fathers have that special relationship with daughters. They look upon that. So I can see my son, when he's going to be out looking for a wife to marry, he's going to be looking for the qualities that my wife has: a nurturer, someone who's loving, someone who's caring. And that's why when you go back into your childhood, how was your parents' relationship? How do they have it? And I had a great mother. I had a mom who was home, took care of me, really loved me. And that's what I had with my spouse. And I can see my dad, how he raised me, a little bit tough, but he was there, cared. And so when you look at that, I think that's really, really important. And there's no such thing as male toxicity. That's something to really rip the families apart. This whole ideology that they're pushing, it really is to destroy. It's really to confuse people. And if you don't know your own identity, I mean, that's a really challenging thing as you get to become an adult. You don't know who or what you are or who or what you stand for. That can be really hard. And once you're confusing, then you become dependent upon something, aka the government. And then all of a sudden you become dependent on them. You can't make your own decisions. I think that's where they're leading this whole thing down to. And we need strong fathers to be in the household to say, hey, it's my responsibility to raise the family, to protect the family, to create a happy environment, and to create young adults who can go out into the world and make their own decisions. I hope I answered the question.
That is awesome. No, very much so. Yeah. It's, the statistics back up what you're saying anyways, right? Like, so the number one predictor, or the number one, and for somebody who wants to yell at me on online, I don't have the data in front of me right now, so I may be miswording it. But like the single parent households with the mom only, like that is the highest risk of somebody not graduating high school, ending up in jail, getting involved with drugs, doing things that are incorrect. And incorrect being like illegal and that type of stuff. And if they're in a single parent household and it's the dad, it's not as good, but it's almost the same as having both parents, mom and dad, in the house on the criminal side of the house. And it's not necessarily because of, the dad, like the mom's not needed. I think very much the mom and dad are both very, very needed in the household. It's just because that dad provides a lot of structure to the house because their brain is wired for that type of thing. Their body is wired for that type of thing, where the mom is going to be much more nurturing and much more caring that way. But, like you said, like the house is bound to be much more economically challenged. They're going to be a lot more poor with one family, with one income in there, and then they're not going to have the structure anyways because the parents never going to be there.
There's chaos.
So man,
it's when you live in chaos, when you live in the inner city, and there's always noise, there's always chaos. You grow up in that. There's never any peace. There's never any calm. And when you live in chaos and you're always stressed, and your adrenals are stressed, and you have cortisol, and you're always going fight or flight, you end up to grow that way, and then then all of your relationships as you get older are tainted. It's a lot more challenging out there. So, I mean, find the support. If you're a single parent, find the support. There's other people out there that can help you out. I mean, parents, grandparents, don't be afraid to ask for the support, because I think the children need that. And the more healthy and the more positive relationships that you can surround yourself with, because kids mirror us. They're a mirror. They're seeing what mom and dad are doing all the time, and they're going to mirror that as they get older. They hear everything. They see everything. And if you're a hypocrite and you do as I say, not as I do, they pick up on that. So just be careful as you're talking and as you're interacting around your children. Now, that's not to say that they shouldn't see you fight, because me and my wife fight and they'll see us fight. But at the end of the day, we will, get back and we'll communicate that as well. So the kids are always watching what you're doing.
Yeah. I think the kids honestly seeing healthy disagreement and coming to good conclusions together is also a great thing. But man, I think that's a solid place to wrap up. I think talking, please, anybody listening, realize that what I'm saying anyways, mom and dad are very, very necessary. I'm obviously passionate about being a dad because guess what? I am one. So like, I love the involvement of the dad in the family, and I really want to encourage folks, and I love some of the nuggets that you mentioned, especially looking at like having that conversation where your brain was more focused on like the money, and growing all that in front of it. Why is it that you're going there, right? If it's to take care of the family, then be with the family. Make sure that they are actually your why, and you're doing that. I have to remind myself of that rather often when I'm focused on this, or I'm getting on another call, or I'm doing something else. Just be there for your family. Keep your focus in the right spot. Like take care of your kids. Grow better men than you, and represent who you want your daughter to marry. So I love that thought process too. Like, I mean, I need to be able to communicate to my daughter what it is to find a man who's going to take care of her, and that means I need to take care of my wife and be that representation. So,
and
Gino,
let me ask you, let me add on one more thing, Adam.
Yeah.
If you're a father or dad out there who's going through a separation or going through a divorce, there's a lot of challenge, there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of bitterness, there's a lot of ego. And you can live in that, and I'm not here to judge you. All I'm trying to say is your kids need you, and there's no reason. There's no benefit to bashing your significant other, your spouse. And that's one thing. My wife, her parents divorced when she was young. She's one of three, so she's the youngest one. And her father never really said anything bad about her mother. And she had always a positive image of her dad. And I think that's what dads we should do. Really need to work on the relationship. You're trying to raise them, and what good of it is it going to say that your mom is terrible? What you're trying to do is trying to put her in a positive light and try to work on the same team. Once again, you're trying to raise these healthy young adults where they don't need you when they're 23 years old. They can go out on their own. So what benefit is it to bash your ex, your significant other? Try to work together and try to make it amicable, because that's what kids want to see. If they see that they're always blaming themselves for this separation, this divorce. If they see that they're not the fault, they're not the problem, but you're willing to work together, man, it'll be so much easier for you and for the family.
And one way or the other, you're impacting the kids.
Yes.
Well, you might as well do it in the way that's going to impact them positively.
Yes.
Because that hate, that anger is not going to help anybody in that party. So you might as well just kind of let it go. But man, yeah, it's always a absolute blast to chat with you, Gino. I really enjoyed kind of actually getting to know you on a different level and talking to you a bit more. And I look forward to the next time I'm able to join you at one of your conferences. I really wish I was able to join you this time around. When my conference could be the week after that. But if people want to get a hold of you, join your community, do anything like that, what's the best way for people to reach out to you and jump into what Jake and Gino have to offer?
Just go to jakeandgino.com. We've got blogs, websites, the podcasts are on there, our YouTube channel. Go visit the website. That's all.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Gino. I really, really, again, appreciate you coming on. You have been quite literally an inspiration on the dad side of the house, and I'm really excited to see. I mean, now it's funny that your youngest and my oldest are roughly the same age, and I'm not sure how I didn't realize that before, but roughly the same age. So it's going to be it's fun.
That's awesome. So, thanks, Adam.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Gino. Have a good one.